you have to know that in your mind, you're actually free, in fact.
Yeah.
Right?
It's not just some kind of mental gymnastics that we're doing where we're kind of not really free, but I'm free.
Hey, so I want to welcome everybody watching. I want to welcome you all back to The Move.
Hey.
Where we are vibing with the book 10 minutes at a time.
Today we're looking at Romans chapter 6, verses 15 to 19.
15 through 19, all of those verses. There is one question we have for you concerning these verses.
Did you read it?
Have you read it? Have you read it? And if you haven't read it, you should go read it. And before or after you read it, you should do what?
Do all the social things, the thumbs up thing,
Thumbs up,
the little subscribe thing, the little bell notification thing, the little comment thing. Just
do it.
All that.
Do it all.
Cool.
All right, cool. We're going to wait right here. Okay.
We are back, but we noticed you didn't hit the like button. Come on.
Do it.
Do it.
Make us feel good.
All right, 10 minutes on the clock. 3, 2, 1. Let's go.
What then? Are we to sin because we're not under law and under grace? We already know what the answer is.
By no means.
Do you not know that if you present yourselves to anyone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one whom you obey, either of sin, which leads to death, or obedience, which leads to righteousness?
Now, this is kind of crazy because he'll explain this in more explicit terms, but what he's talking about here is you and I are actually still slaves.
Yes.
So we talked in our last, 10 minutes, how you are free from sin.
Yeah.
And that's true.
True.
But it's not true that you're just free.
Yeah.
There isn't freedom from just anything and everything. It's not just freedom, period. You are free from sin.
Because freedom does not mean that you're completely unattached.
No.
Right? That is a false freedom. Mm-hmm. There is no freedom when you're completely unattached.
Mm-mm. What he's saying is that everyone is a servant, everyone is a slave
to something. Yeah.
But the thing that which you are a slave to is up to you. Now, this takes origin in kind of the historical context of the day, that if you were in poverty, you actually could approach someone and sell yourself into slavery. Now, this is a different kind of slavery than the one. Yeah, this is not the kind that we remember when we think of, Martin Luther King, U.S. history, people taking
chattel slavery, violation of body, violation of agency, completely dehumanizing.
Indentured servitude is more like you work for them and live on their property in certain respects. Yes. But there is a sense that when you sell yourself into that type of slavery, you're still beholden to that person as a master, and you have an obligation to this person.
Yes.
Paul's setting this framework where you can either be obligated or a servant or a slave to sin.
Yes. And the wages are what when you work for sin?
Death.
Death.
Yeah. Or you can choose to be a servant or a slave to righteousness.
And that righteousness is given to you because you earned it as a wage?
No.
It's given to you how?
You're given the wage of righteousness not because of what you've done, but because of the goodness of that person.
Oh, Justin, I was hoping you were going to pick up what I was laying down.
Did I miss it?
It's a free gift.
Okay, sorry.
Right?
I was just going to go all the way there.
So it's not a wage. It's a free gift.
Thank you. Very good. Very good.
So that then when you offer yourself, I can think of this offering of slave. First, before I give this illustration, this offering of slavery, Paul says something very curious about this slavery language. And that is that he's like, you're not really a slave, although we're talking about slavery and you are a slave, but I speak in human terms.
Yeah.
What's going on in?
He's basically saying, listen, the word slave is an imperfect way to describe it. He's like, I'm describing the thing, but it is in a true sense, it's not a one-to-one comparison.
Yeah.
So in which way does it fall short?
I'm waiting on you.
This is just a genuine question that came to my mind. I was wondering if you had an idea.
Well, here's how I see. There's a certain way of thinking about it. And I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you now about relationships.
Oh.
Right? And we can play that slow down music and start talking about relationships. Here's something that happens. I was in a relationship once, right? Where
more than once.
I've been in more than one relationship, but I'm talking about this one time.
Okay, fair.
Right? I was in this one relationship where after we broke up, the young lady, who's a beautiful young lady, was on my mind every single day for about a year straight.
I've been there.
Right?
That happened to me once.
Yeah, and it was after a year that then I could have her off my mind. Like 3 or 4, a day would go where I wouldn't think of her. And I was like, I didn't think about her yesterday. And then so on and so forth, where it lessened over time. Now, here's what happens. For that year, I remember the question.
You know what the young people call that?
What
call it being whipped.
Is it? I'm not sure if that's the young people. I called that when I was young. So I remember for a year, if somebody would ask me if I was single, in my mind, I couldn't say. I would say with my mouth, like, yeah, I'm single. But in my mind, I still felt like she was my girlfriend. Right? I think John Mayer wrote a song about this. He's like, I still feel like your man. Right? Like, I still feel like your man. So, like, I couldn't give myself to somebody else, like date or explore somebody else, because I was a slave to this relationship. Now.
So expound on this idea of being the slave to the relationship. What does that mean? Like, you couldn't help but have that dictate your life? Like,
yeah,
it
man.
Limited your options? In which respect was that slavery?
It was a slavery because I wasn't free to actually explore and do that which a single guy would, right? And even things that presented themselves before me, good things, other relationship opportunities, or even just activities with friends, right? That I couldn't do with a clear conscience because I hadn't yet fully accepted in my life that I was actually a single man. Here's the thing. In truth and in fact, I was a single man.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I hadn't gone through this grieving process of like the denial, the anger, right? Like the bargaining, the depression, the acceptance. Like I would wallow in some version of that, so that then in truth and in fact, I was free from this relationship, but in my mind, I wasn't. And I think what Paul is trying to get at with this what I'm trying to get at is that you have to know that in your mind, you're actually free in fact.
Yeah.
Right?
It's not just some kind of mental gymnastics that we're doing where we're kind of not really free, but I'm free.
No, and the reason that you're free is because at the cross, Jesus broke up with sin.
Yeah.
You're good.
Yeah.
But you have to actually receive that for yourself. So then how do you I think this is where then you get to this thing of how to receive that righteousness, right? And I think verse 17, but thanks be to God that you were once slaves of sin, have become obedient from the heart to the standard of teaching which you were committed. You hear that language?
Yeah. I want to jump in real quick, and I'll actually refer to this verse in a second, because I wanted to share with you kind of what jumped into my mind when I first heard the language of being a slave to righteousness.
Yeah.
Because I know what slavery feels like, slavery to sin at least feels like.
Yeah.
It means that I want to do one thing, but I can't help but do the other thing.
Yeah.
I want to be pure. I want to be holy. I want to live honorably. I want to be a good man, husband, fill in the blank. Yeah. But my flesh wars against me and causes me to do the thing that I don't want to do. It's easier to be, like, as a slave to sin, it's easier to act out sin than it is to do the other thing. So when I heard the language of slave to righteousness, I said, wow, my entire paradigm has shifted where it's now easier to do that which righteousness is compelling me to do.
Yeah.
If there was a slave cracking a whip, that slave master used to be something that's causing me to go down the path of death.
Yeah, now it's
like,
righteousness.
I can't help but do righteousness. Sometimes I might participate in the
patterns of my former ignorance,
but now I don't have to be. I don't have to be a slave to that, because now I am a slave to righteousness. And so when I live out obedience, it's no longer a work of the flesh. It's no longer this difficult thing that I'm doing, but this work of righteousness, this obedience of faith, is coming up from, the language says in verse 17, from the heart.
Yeah, and it's obedience from the heart, right?
Yeah.
And this obedience from the heart is that in my heart, I believe that Jesus Christ is Lord, that he's given himself for me, that he is the atoning sacrifice for the sin of all humanity, and that God gave him to me because of great love towards me. And that when that thing is in my heart, when I am obedient to that standard of teaching, I then present myself as a slave to righteousness. What does that mean? Father, I thank you that I am who you say I am, that I'm free to accept your love, that I can suffer, endure, that I can have a character after the divine similitude, so that I can shine like you in this world and not hold other people's sin against them. I never have to let sin against the sin against me produced sin within me, because I am now a slave to the goodness of your love in me. And because the goodness of your love is in me, I get to live out that goodness and love others freely.
Yeah.
And I offer myself this way every day because my life begins from where he finished off.
Yeah. You no longer have to do in order to become, but you do because you have already become.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're not doing these good works in a certain sense to fill up your cup so that someday you might attain that which God says you could be.
No.
You're doing from the overflow, from the abundance of what God has already done for you. Your cup isn't empty and you're trying to fill it. Your cup is already full, and now it's out overflowing to others.
Because now that you have been set free from sin and have become slaves to God, the fruit you get leads to sanctification and its end, eternal life. And notice it's fruit, because fruit is what righteous trees bear.
Yeah.
And we're now righteous trees. So when I present myself a righteous tree, when I name myself a godly and goodly plant in the vineyard of God, when I identify myself as a man who is planted by the waters, the flowing living water, the natural outflow, the fruit is this sanctification that leads to eternal life.
That's right.
Every once in a while, there's a little fruit that doesn't quite get there, but that's not the trend of the tree.
No.
Because of what the tree is. So I thank God that I am the sort of tree he says I am, and I offer myself to that truth, obedient from my heart, that my righteousness is secure because Jesus Christ has gone before me. And in that way, I'm a slave in my mind, first and only to the righteousness of God.
That's right. Well, there you guys go. Slaves to Righteousness. We'll continue this conversation tomorrow in the next 10 minutes.